Lauren Steiner is our guest, and she's been an progressive activist for a long time. In fact, she was first on board with Bernie Sanders. She started the LA for Bernie in the spring of 2015. And, she's here to talk about how she feels about it all now.
Well, Jimmy, I exited last June of 2017, because I couldn't take it anymore. And really, I was hoping that he would answer Nick Branagh's call to start the People's Party. But I've talked to Bernie twice now about going independent, and he nods his head and humors me, but I know that he has had a negative opinion about third parties ever since he did so abysmally when he ran in Vermont in the 70s for a third party. But that's ridiculous, because things have changed. I mean, in California, for example, independents, NPPs, has just surpassed Republican in terms of registration.
NPPs means no preference party, right?
No party preference,
No party preference, meaning you're an independent.
Right.
But you can't call yourself an independent in California because there's a party called the Independent Party.
The American Independent Party,
which is a right-wing party.
Yes, exactly.
So you have to call yourself an NPP.
Yeah. So anyway, Bernie, the thing that I take issue with Bernie was the weekend before our primary election on June 5th, he came out here for 3 events. He was in Anaheim talking to the Disneyland workers. Then he went to Carson to do something for the longshoremen. Then he came here to Los Angeles to do something for the Real Justice PAC, which is trying to elect progressive DAs. Now, when he was in Anaheim, they were trying to recall Josh Newman, who won a normally Republican seat. So the Republicans put all their forces to do a recall because Josh Newman voted for the gas tax. And Bernie was down there in Anaheim in his district. He did not once rally up those people to go out and vote on Tuesday to vote against the recall. Then he comes up to, L.A. for this Real Justice PAC thing, and he's talking about...
That's with Sean King?
With Sean King and Patrice Cullors.
We covered that.
I was there, too. They were talking about, his racial justice platform, which I give him credit. He's totally evolved on that. But guess what? They had 6 candidates running for district attorney. There was Pamela Price in Alameda County, Genevieve Jones-Wright in San Diego County, Noah Phillips in Sacramento. Did Bernie mention any of those names at all? And we had a lot of candidates that were really upset with him because he took people away from get out the vote in the last weekend before our election because he knows that people will come and see him. So thousands of people stopped canvassing in their neighborhoods to go see Bernie. And while I agree with everything he said, he wasn't being the most strategic either. And I don't think he has anyone on his staff who advises him like this.
So what you're saying is that Bernie came out to California, and he came out the week before our primary vote.
The
weekend before our primary vote. And so instead of progressive volunteers and whatever activists out there knocking on doors to stir up the vote, they were then pulled away from doing that to go to this Bernie event, and you could have predicted that that's what was going to happen, and yet he did it anyway, and he didn't do anything to help get the vote out in California. That's what you're saying?
Yeah. Now, I was told that some of the organizations that sponsored these rallies were 501c3s, and you cannot endorse a candidate or mention a candidate on their stage because their nonprofit status could be threatened. However, that did not preclude Bernie from having a separate rally in the same location for these candidates. Why did he not endorse Gail McLaughlin? He endorsed her in 2014 when she was running for
mayor.
She was running the Richmond Progressive Alliance when they were running to take over the city council. Our Revolution endorsed her. She got every single Our Revolution over 30.
But Bernie didn't endorse Gail McLaughlin.
No, he didn't.
Gail's been on this show plenty.
Yeah.
And we're big fans of Gail. She took on Chevron and she beat them.
Yep.
And she started the Richmond Progressive Alliance. Bernie endorsed her in 2014.
Yep.
Doesn't endorse her this year, even though Our Revolution endorsed her. And why do you think that is?
Well, first I thought maybe it was because she wasn't a Democrat, but then it turns out the Democratic Party didn't endorse anyone either because it was between Eleni Kounalakis, who self-funded her campaign with $4.2 million of her own money. Her father, a big real estate developer, put $4.8 million. And then Ed Hernandez, who is the current lieutenant governor, not lieutenant governor, I forget what his current thing is, he raised $2 million. So poor Gail, she had about $250,000.
Right.
Only got a few percentage points, under 5% of the total vote, showing that you really can't run corporate free on anything, in my mind, anything other than either the highest level, the president, or the most local level, city council. And basically because what you're doing is you're splitting the progressive dollars, you're splitting the progressive volunteer hours. It's very difficult, So I'm very dubious about the ability of our corporate-free candidates to get by unless we start strategizing.
So let's talk. We're going to get to that, but let's finish off with Bernie. So
Yeah.
you started the LA for Bernie organization.
Yes, it was a volunteer group that was on the ground a year before his campaign hit California. We started in May of 2015, and we did all sorts of events for him. The most fun thing I did was change the lyrics of Christmas carols.
Right, we saw you when you were doing that. That was fantastic.
Well,
So what do you think about Bernie's strategy now? So Bernie's strategy is he didn't call out the Democratic Party for rigging the primary. How did you feel about that?
Well, Jane said it would look like sour grapes. And I could understand how they would feel that way. In other words, he lost, and therefore he was complaining or trying to blame it on someone.
No, you have a rigged system you have to fix.
Yeah.
I'd like to fix a rigged system, but I don't want people to think I'm being sorry. What?
Yeah.
That's what you have to... Yeah, you know what? Some people are going to say that. You still have to do it, no?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think
he never mentioned about... He never... Go ahead.
When they took his voter file... See, when I said to him, when I met him in 2014 for the second time, the first time I met him was in 2011, and I asked him to please challenge Obama in the 2012 primary, and he said no. He wasn't going to take on the Democratic Party then either. So when I talked to him in 2014, I said, please run as an independent. That way you can lead a movement and not a campaign. And he said, others have told me that. I will consider it. But when he didn't do it, my understanding was he wanted to get coverage by the media, and he wanted to be in the debates. Well, we know what happened there. They limited the debates to 6. They put them on Saturdays opposite some football game.
And MSNBC forbid their hosts from covering him.
Right, exactly. I mean, so by that point, when they took his data...
And he never mentioned that either. He never talks about that.
No, he never talks about
so
that.
Ed Schultz comes out and blows the whistle off MSNBC.
And
it's
then
all
he gets
bullshit.
fired.
They won't even allow... He was given an order not to cover Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders doesn't even mention it.
Yeah.
He goes on MSNBC all the time, doesn't mention it now.
Yeah. So that was the point at which I thought...
And they can cover Bernie now because he's not a threat now, right? That's why MSNBC will have him on. And, right, wouldn't you agree with that? Because there's not a campaign happening right now where he can...
Probably.
Okay.
Probably. But that would have been the point. When they took his voter file and they actually did do a lawsuit, the campaign did a lawsuit to get it back, that would have been the time to say, they're cheating me, I'm leaving, I'm running third party. So the next time I told Bernie to go independent was the night before the California primary, when there were rumors that Hillary was going to be indicted by Comey, but they were going to wait until after the convention because they didn't want Bernie to win. So the rumor, and of course we all believed it because by this point we knew how they had rigged it against him. The rumor was going to be they were going to allow Hillary to win the nomination, then Comey was going to indict her, and then they were going to put in either Warren or Biden, someone more to their liking. So I got to the headquarters an hour early so I could be at the front of the line. By this point, I no longer had the kind of personal access to Bernie that I used to have before he became a rock star. So I'm standing there patiently waiting. I had brought articles about, one, how Ralph Nader did not cost Al Gore the election.
We've covered that. He
because
did not. 300,000 Democrats voted for George Bush in Florida.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So we know that Bernie stopped talking to Ralph Nader in 2000 because he blamed him for that. And I was one of those people who watched all of Bernie's old speeches. I remember watching his press conference when he came to Congress in 1991. They said, how are you going to do things differently? He says, I'm going to bring in people like Ralph Nader. That was 91. By 2000, he stopped talking to him. So I had this article that Kevin Zeese from popularresistance.org had written, laying out all the reasons Gore lost. And I had an article about third parties and the popularity of third parties now in the country, or how people were independent. And I had an opportunity to hand it to Karina Driscoll, his daughter-in-law, and chat with her for a while. And then when Bernie came by at the end, after giving his speech, got off the podium, was walking by and he was shaking hands and nodding, someone has a picture of me whispering in his ear. And I thought, how can I say what I want to say in the fewest of words? And I said, Bernie, if they try to steal it from you and give it to Biden or Warren, run with Jill Stein. You can win. And that's exactly what I said to him. And, of course, he doesn't say anything. He's just nodding and smiling and walking along. But I really felt that, I gave it the old college try. I mean, literally 3 times, I tried. And now I don't know. I'm going to try to see Jeff Weaver. I'm going to be in Washington where Jeff lives. Jeff is going to be running his 2020 campaign. I do think he's going to run, and I'm going to have some conversations with Jeff Weaver about what I think Bernie needs to do.
What do you think Bernie needs to do?
Well, I think Bernie needs to take off the gloves right now, and I think he does.
He does. He's not going to.
Well,
it's obvious he's not going to. He plays ball. He played ball in the primary. He was nice. And then he goes on this tour, this unity tour with Tom Perez, which was supposed to be a Medicare for All tour. Did you know that? It was supposed to be a Medicare for All tour.
Yeah.
And then Bernie gets co-opted. The Democrats say, no, you can't do that. You're going to go around with Tom Perez and talk to everybody about how great you guys are unified now. And that's what he did.
Well, I think, I'm not as hard on Bernie as you are, because I think he's really doing a good job bringing out the issues. And, he has shifted the party to the left, at least rhetorically. So I think it's going to be who knows? If you work within this party, change is going to be so slow.
It's incrementalism.
We're going to be dead before, the planet will be...
The planet's going to be dead.
Before we get anywhere.
Yeah. But Bernie will be dead, and the planet will be dead, and we will be nowhere. And so, I'm
with Chris Hedges. Nonviolent civil disobedience. He told me once, Chris, that if you get 2 to 3% of the population just standing up and resisting, that's all it takes to make a revolution in this country. But the problem is, people have lost their ability to think critically and challenge authority because the education system is being privatized, the media is being privatized. They're trying to silence independent journalists. I was looking up what Dea Schlossberg was charged with. She was charged for covering the valve turners, the people that turned off the oil.
Yes.
She was charged with 3 felonies, 45 years in jail if they didn't drop those charges.
You're talking about up at DAPL?
Yes, in North Dakota. Edward Snowden tweeted, "Hey, I'm only charged with 30 years for what I did."
Right.
And there were 2 other people that covered the same action in Washington State, also charged with felonies. They dropped the charges. So they're targeting journalists. They're targeting activists. It's becoming very difficult, and I'm very worried, especially when we have someone with... I don't really call Trump a fascist. I don't think he's smart enough to even have an ideology in the way that, like, Hitler had an ideology and Mussolini. His ideology is himself. He's an egotistical narcissist, and everything is based on how you talk about it.
With right-wing tendencies. Right.
Right. He's an authoritarian for sure.
Yes.
He's a businessman. He just wants to tell everybody what to do, right?
Yes.
So
did you tell me what you think Bernie needed to do?
Well, I think Bernie needs to call out the Democratic Party when they do things like this, like when Tom Perez endorsed Cuomo.
Did Bernie call him out for that?
No.
No, he didn't. Huh?
But Bernie doesn't.
He's not sticking up for the progressive in that race, Cynthia Nixon. Bernie's not doing that.
Well, Our Revolution endorsed her.
So Our Revolution endorsed her.
I'm not sure. I can't speak definitively whether Bernie did or did not.
Okay.
That will remain to be seen whether Bernie he needs to start endorsing candidates because Our Revolution, nobody knows what that is.
Right.
But I do have knowledge that they have Bernie's list, that coveted list.
Our Revolution.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So when they do endorse a candidate, they are mailing to Bernie's list. But here's the thing. Bernie cannot coordinate with Our Revolution because that's the way PACs work.
Right.
Yeah. So I think Bernie needs to, I don't know. Bernie's limited. He's 76 years old. I mean, I wear a shirt all the time. It says Bernie 2020 on the back, and on the front it says 79 is the new 50 because people... That's something...
So will you Dem enter again for Bernie if he runs in 2020?
I will vote for Bernie if he runs.
So you'll Dem enter?
I don't think I will to vote for him in the primary, but then I'll Dem exit again right after.
So you'll Dem enter, vote for Bernie, and then Dem exit.
Well, I mean, who am I going to vote for? Counterfeit Kamala, bought Booker? I mean, that's who's going to run. Or Eric Garcetti, Gutless Garcetti. I've got these alliterative hashtags for all these guys that are, running for president. Kristen Gillibrand, she's another one, former Republican, who's trying to pretend, how progressive she is. I really feel these people are all Johnny-come-latelys to these progressive ideals, so I don't really care about the rhetoric because Bernie's got a 40-year track record of standing up for these positions. So unless there's somebody else better, I am going to vote for him.
Yeah, I want to vote for him too. We have these questions. what if he, like, for instance, what is this with this strategy of not endorsing progressives in races? What is with this strategy of not building an organization outside the Democratic Party, which is what he called for in the 90s? He said there has to be a progressive movement and it has to happen outside the Democratic Party because the Democrats, Republicans, it doesn't matter. People don't see any difference between them. And guess what? The stories we covered today prove that there is very little difference between the Democrats and Republicans, that the Democrats in all real ways enable Trump. They enable him with Wall Street. They enable him with foreign wars. They enable him with the Pentagon budget. They enable him just now in California with net neutrality. He repealed net neutrality. The Democrats in California had a chance to have their own, and they got rid of it. So the revolution is not happening. When Bernie said, it sounds like you're ready for a revolution, I'm questioning whether that was intellectually honest, because now he's pushing for incrementalism inside the Democratic Party, correct? Would you agree with that?
Yes, he is. But I also think when he talked about a political revolution, it's very different from the kind of revolution I'm speaking about and Chris Hedges is speaking about. That's actually people on the street doing nonviolent civil disobedience like Bernie did in the 60s when he was arrested for protesting segregated housing in Chicago.
Right, when he was when he chained himself to that black woman, right?
I don't remember. Is that what he did?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I just, it just seems like the opposite of what Bernie had been saying all along. And so he's still, tip of the hat. I tip of the hat that he still, he has brought Medicare for all, free college, and a living wage. People are now talking about it. And that is, much more than I've done for this country. So, Bernie's a greater man than me for sure. But again, his biggest supporters are confused, and we just need him to answer these questions. Like, why won't you make sure that the Democratic primary is democratic? Why won't you call out people who cheated you for cheating you? Why won't you now try to build a third party? You're the most. If Bernie Sanders and Nina Turner and Tulsi Gabbard started a third party, what do you think? That's how you start a third party.
Yeah.
And the Greens were on 4. Everybody says the Greens, they're horrible. They're unorganized and all this stuff, and there's too much infighting and all this stuff. Yet they managed to get on, and that might all be true. Yet they managed to get on 48 states' ballots.
Yeah.
So this idea that you can't get the ballot access is so hard. Well, the Greens do it. They got on 48. Jill Stein was on 48 states' ballots. That's all you need to win.
Yeah.
So why do you think people keep saying a third party is undoable?
Well, I don't know, but you know what, Jimmy? I focus on what we can do locally. I believe in working on legislation rather than on representation, because that electoral politics is you're getting someone to represent you, and then you have to trust that they're going to represent you. So then it becomes electoral politics becomes a matter of running candidates, and then you have to hold them accountable. I think I've been able to see more change working on an issue basis. Like we are getting. Group of young activists have been able to get Los Angeles to start divesting from Wells Fargo. The same group has been able to get Los Angeles to start the mechanism for a public bank. Other groups are working on housing. Mel Tilakaratne, who you have to have on your show, is fantastic. The She Does movement. She does deserve shelter, dignity, respect, because the most vulnerable of the homeless are the women, including grandmothers who are raped nightly on the streets of Los Angeles. And he was able to get Gutless Garcetti to commit to having 4 of those 15 shelters that they're going to put in each of the council districts be for women only, because women don't want to go into a shelter where there's men there. They can get raped in the shelter. So there are activists out there that are really making change on the local level, where I personally have always felt change is most easily affected. So I try not to spend too much time worrying about Bernie and even federal legislation. I like to look at local campaigns, because I think when you have successes, you can build morale, which grows the movement. So that's my orientation as an activist.
The next live Jimmy Dore show is July 1st in Portland, Oregon, July 15th in Chicago, and July 27th in Burbank, California. Go to jimmydorecomedy.com for a link for all those tickets to those shows. Plus, don't forget, become a patron. To help support independent media, we give you hours of bonus content every week. Plus, every Saturday at 2 p.m., we do our Solid Chat Saturday. It's our live stream on Saturdays, 2 p.m. Pacific time. Stick around for that. And please make sure you're subscribed. Even though you think you are subscribed to this channel, they're unsubscribing people every day. Just check. Click subscribe and then click the bell to make sure they send you a notification when we're dropping videos. Otherwise, they won't tell you. Thanks for your support.